Hello and thank you for coming to check this out. For this guide we are going to have a good look at rigging in motion. And the example we're going to use this time is making some duration controls for your title graphics. So we're going to do it by making this very simple graphic here. So we've got shape layers and text elements in there, and we've got some positional animation and scale a few times, and all the elements are rigged up in motion to this slider here. So we've got a minimum range and we've got a maximum range, and then we have got everything in between, and all the timing of the elements should update correctly. Also for beginners, we're going to look at these very simple on-screen controls here for position and scale, and this height control as well. Okay, it's going to be a long one. We're going to go through and do everything step by step, so hopefully I'll see you at the end. Let's jump into motion and get started. Okay, to get started in motion, this is just a regular motion project file. It's not yet a Final Cut titles template. When all the steps are done, we can publish it as a titles template then. It is just 1920 by 1080, and the duration is 5 seconds, so 30 frames a second. That gives us 150 frames for the duration of the project. So what I think the best thing to do is I'm just going to walk you through each step and explain as little as possible as we do that, and as we complete each step then we can stop, have a look at what we did and why we did that. Right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I have this group. I'm just going to call this height control. I'm going to grab a shape, and I'm just going to draw a shape in the canvas. So project's 1920 by 1080. I'm going to come to geometry and make this height 800. The width is just arbitrary, just gives us something to visualize, so we can set that at 10. Okay, I want to grab that shape and I want to grab the anchor point, and I'm going to come into properties, grab that anchor point and drag it down to sit at the end. In properties I'm going to make sure that that is exactly minus 400, and this position is exactly minus 400 on the y-axis. If we come into scale, just have a look now. If we move that, everything animates, everything adjusts up and down without the shape jiggling around. Okay, I'll reset that. I'm going to publish that Y parameter now. Jump into publish parameters and call this height. And the last thing I can do is just set the X position to 0. Okay, so that is step 1. Okay, then for step 2, I'm going to add another group, and I'm going to call this group the bubble. And I will come and grab the circle tool and just draw a circle into the canvas. Let's come to geometry and we can give it a radius of 100, and come to properties, center it. Okay, so the bubble group itself is centered and the shape within the group is centered. Okay then, so what we want to do now is grab the bubble group, not the shape. We want to grab the bubble group, and we can bring the Y to sit right about here, minus 400 will be good. So then the center point of the group is sitting right at the bottom end of the rectangle, the bottom edge, but it could be anywhere. So the next step we're going to do is grab bubble group, grab the Y parameter, and we're going to choose link and drag in that rectangle as the source. Then choose object attributes, edges, top. And I'm just going to call this link top edge. And that is the end of step 2. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll stop and have a look at what we did, why we did it that way in the first 2 steps. Okay, so first of all, let's come to project and look at the published parameters. So see the height control. So now if we adjust that height, you can see that is going to take the bubble group with it. But this is just going to be a manual control in the template, like you saw in the introduction. It's not something that we're going to animate. But we do want to animate the traversal of the bubble group from the bottom to the top. And we're going to do that by rigging a parameter from this link. Okay, so if you've seen previous guides we've done with automatic titles, you'll know that usually we would animate by keyframing this custom mix slider here. So just for example now, we're not going to do things this way, we're going to do things differently, but just to demonstrate, if we were to keyframe that, or you could ramp it with the ramp behavior, if we were to keyframe that over time, then that bubble group is going to rise. See, we're turning the link from off to on pretty much over that many frames, so that's going to animate it up to that top edge. And so the first thing we're thinking about here is how that height control works. So if we just turn off this height control group, we don't need to see it, but it's there and it's acting on, it's an active part of the template. So it's a null object. Now if we adjust that height, you'll see that the distance the circle travels has adjusted. If we reset it, okay, so that is how the height control works in this situation. Alright then, so then we want to think about how are we going to actually animate. Let's reset that custom mix. What we are going to use this time around, well, one way to go about it, if we want to rig it, is we could add the ramp behavior. And what we want to do is, so you'll see this, that custom mix has a value of 0 to 1, so we'd want the start value to be -1 and the end value to be 0. So then over the course of the ramp, that mix is going back up, running between on and off, which will animate the circle, which is cool. And then we can rig for the ramp behavior, we can rig the start offset and end offset. But in this case, we don't need a full duration control. We're going to do it another way. One thing with the ramp behavior is that you're really limited to ease options with it. Okay, so all you can do really is give it curvature, which is like an ease in, ease out. We want to do something better than that. So I'm just going to get rid of that ramp behavior. And we're ready then for step 3. Right, so to animate the bubble group from along the y-axis from its default position up to meet the top edge of the height control. So before, when I was talking about ramp, when I mentioned we don't need full duration, is that we don't need a full maximum 150 frames duration. So what we can do to have a nicer animation is that we're going to use this menu here, and we're going to choose ease in, and you can see that that has given us a speed curve down here in the keyframe editor, and you'll see the default the default value for minimum time range is 10. And this value here equates to frames, so this is going to animate now over 10 frames. And the maximum you can get out of this setting is 100. If you try and enter a higher value, it's just going to stay kicked back to 100. So 100 frames in our project is 3 seconds and 10 frames. Pretty much. 90 frames is 3 seconds and then 10 more. So we only really need to use 90 of these frames to round it out to 3 seconds. And this is where the rigging is going to begin. So once again, we're using this option so that we can get a nicer animation than just using ramp with curvature control. Okay, so the next steps are we're going to grab this mix time range. We're going to choose add to rig, new slider. I'm going to call this rig itself duration, and it's automatically populated the slider widget for us, so I'm going to call this slider widget duration as well. So in the slider here we have got maximum value of 100, minimum value for the range is 0. So at this point here, 0, let's set this value to 30, so that means at the minimum range the animation is 30 frames 1 second. Come up here to 100, and here we're going to set the value at 90. So we just set a minimum duration of 1 second and a maximum duration of 3 seconds. The overshoot on the text is going to be another 1 second on top of that. Okay, so from here, well, this is pretty much the end of step 3. We've got the first stage of the rig set up, and we're just going to build on top of this, adding more and more parameters to this one slider here. Was there anything else to do before step 4? No, okay, so we'll move on to the next step. Okay, for step 4 we want to add the scale animation for the circle. So as it moves from beginning to end on the y-axis, we want to scale from 0 to 100, but we want that scaling animation to also fit into the duration control as well. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to select the bubble group, add a new group. So the new group goes above. I'm going to call this group scale null. In that group, I'm just going to grab a shape and draw any shape, any size in there, and I'm going to call this shape the scale null. The only thing that matters about this object here is that it has a default scale of 100. Okay, so I'm going to grab the circle in the bubble group, and I'm going to give this a default scale now of 0. Then I'm going to add a link to that scale and drag in this null scale as the source. So now through the link it takes on the default scale value of the null object there. Okay, and once again we can use the same method we did before. I'm going to grab custom mix, set that to ease in, and we have the widget ready to go. I'm just going to grab that mix over time. No, I don't want that. I want this one. I'm going to grab the mix time range, drag that into the duration widget there, and we can set it up, okay, the same way. Actually, no, we're good. So at the minimum range, we're going to set that value to 30, and at the maximum range, we're going to set that value to 90. So now the scaling is synced up with the duration control. Okay, so that is step 4. Okay, so for step 5, we want to animate the mask to wipe the circle out to bring in the overshooting text. So what we will do is, in the bubble group, I'm going to grab the circle tool and draw in another circle. We want it to be the same size as the first one, so we'll set that to, 100. I'm going to call this the wipe, and reset its position so that it is sitting on top of the other one. Let's change the color to help us tell them apart. Okay, in properties, I'll give it a default scale of 0. And now I'm going to link that scale to that null object again. Now this time in the link, we are going to grab custom mix, leave it as it is, and choose parameter behavior ramp. Set start value to -1. End value is at 0. So now the ramp behavior is going to animate that mask element from its default of 0 to the default value of the null object over the duration of the ramp behavior. So what we want to do now is add parameters of this ramp behavior to our duration widget to sync everything up. Okay, so to get the animation for the wipe to start only when the first part of the animation is finished, we want to add the start offset to the duration slider. So I'm going to drag it to the duration there, and let's set the range down to the minimum. So the start offset parameter counts forward from the beginning. So if I want it to start on the 30th frame, which is exactly when the first animation finishes, I can just set the value there of 30. And likewise at the maximum range there, we can set that value at 90. Okay, so now we can see that the ramp only begins at the end of the animation. It's always going to start wherever the first part of the animation finishes. But it's going to continue all the way to the end of the project duration. So we want to set a duration for the ramp itself, and we're going to do that by using the end offset. I can't remember exactly what I did with that original demonstration in the introduction, but let's do it over 10 frames, just nice and quick. So we'll grab the end offset of the ramp behavior and we're going to drag that into the duration as well. And then, so come down to the minimum range. Sometimes when you click, you end up nudging it around and you'll see the value change. So you can just drag it back in there. Or to be sure, you can just double click on that stopper into the value exactly. Yeah, sometimes when you click between them, you might see that the value changes. So then, either just drag it up or double click to be exactly sure. Okay, so then at the minimum range, the ramp starts on the 30th frame. We want it to go for 10 frames, so we're going to set the end offset value, but remember the end offset value counts backwards. So if I was to give it an end offset value of 100, then we're coming back 100 frames from the end, so that would be at frame 100, which makes pretty much ending on the 50th frame here, so that would make the duration 20 frames. So then it would be 20 frames long. We want it to go for just 10 frames, so let's make it 110. That'll do. And at the maximum range then, we want it to end on the 100th frame, so then an end offset of 50. Okay, that will do. Alright, so, and if we move this slider around, it should be constantly that 10 frames to wipe it out. Alright then, so the next step is to actually apply that mask. Alright, so step 7, I'll just set the duration down to minimum range. We can turn off this null object. And, okay, so I'm going to grab this circle, add an image mask, and drag in white as the image mask source and set that to subtract. So you're going to see it leaves a kind of an artifact ghost lines around there. It's scaling to the same size, but you can often get this. So I'm going to grab that link to the null, and here for the offset I'm going to add 1.5 on the X and 1.5 on the Y to get rid of those ghost lines there. Maybe even more than that. Let's make it 1.7 and 1.7. Alright, let's see what we get. Maybe that is a bit too fast. What do you think? Let's just leave it at that for now. If you wanted to change it, we would come into the duration control here. Alright, let's give it another couple of frames to run. So here I'd want this to be 108, and up here 48. Let's see how that looks now. Okay, yeah, that's a bit better. Again, it's just a basic animation to give us something to work with. So then we have the circle masking out. So adjusting the duration, stage 1, stage 2, all synced up with the duration control there. So the next step then is to add the text element, and that is step 8. Alright, to add the text, let's bring the playhead back to just where the bubble is being wiped out, and I'm going to select bubble group, grab the text tool, and I'm just going to click in there and add a character. I'm just using Helvetica, set to bold, center it here, and in properties center it so that it jumps up there into the group. Come to text layout, and then here anchor position, set that to center, and then for size I think about 185. Yep, and then just come to properties and manually drag it in. That will do. Alright, so now we want to overshoot this. So I've done lots of guides on overshoot with text before. Because this is not a text string, we don't need to add the opacity to the sequence text, if you're wondering why I don't put that in. Anyway, I'm going to grab B, grab the character, come to behaviors, text animation, sequence text. Right, choose from keyframes, add format to scale, and here with scale going to add parameter behavior overshoot. So I'll just remind you again, we're just using one character, not a text string, so I'm not going to add also I'm not also going to add opacity to it. Should work normally without the opacity with just one character. Okay, so we want start value -100, and what we're going to do, we're going to set the duration of the overshoot in the overshoot behavior by giving it an end offset of 120. So that gives it 120 out of 150, 30 frames to run. And there it is there. If we just turn off the circle altogether, there's the character popping in. I'll turn this circle back on. Right, but now, as before, we want this only to begin right about, I think about 5 frames after the mask begins. So, well, let's work it out. Might have made that mask too fast actually. So we're going to grab the sequence text. We're going to grab the start offset of the sequence text and drag that into the duration slider. So we want everything to be about +5, I think. We'll see. So at minimum range, start offset at 35. Yeah, okay. And then at maximum range, start offset at 95. Okay, so then we're all done. If we just adjust that range, everything should be synced up. It's not looking quite as good as the demo and the introduction. I forgot just the timing of what I did with the mask. Okay, but we're pretty much there. So we've covered all the steps. So let's stop now. While we're here, we'll have a look at how the height control is working, and then we'll have a look at what we can publish through. All right, let's come and check out published parameters. So far we just published height, right? So now we're at the end of everything. Let's adjust the height and see how it works. Should work just fine. Okay, so now we get a good idea of how versatile and useful that method of setting a height control is. And remember, the whole point of this is that we are animating through behaviors. I like to think of it, we're keyframing by using behaviors. You know, behaviors are just packets of keyframes. And when you use behaviors, you can then publish parameters through, even though they're pre-animated in the template. And that's what we've done with using the link and the ramp parameters to put those onto a widget. So all of our keyframes are now packaged in the behaviors, and we've sent the parameters that we want that are important for duration to the widget, and now we can publish the widget. So that's there for us to use. What else do we want to do? So we want to grab the text. You can edit it directly in Final Cut, but let's publish the color, and let's come to format, and we can publish the text field as well. We could publish size too, but let's just leave that. You can update that directly in Final Cut. So what have we got? Okay, we got color. All right, oh, the circle. Let's publish the color of the circle as well. What was that one? That was text color, and this one is, let's call it bubble color. Okay, we'll organize these properly later. In the introduction, you saw that there were some on-screen controls, so how about we go ahead and set up those basic on-screen controls as well. So that will be our step 10. Alright, let's make some controls so it can be dragged around and positioned in Final Cut. First thing we need to do is, okay, gonna scale null, we can leave there. Gonna close up the bubble group and the height control. I'm gonna select bubble group and add a new group in there, and going to grab bubble and height control and drag them into this group here, and let's call that graphic. Okay, in the project I'm gonna add a new group. I'm going to call this controls, and I am going to drag that, place that group at the bottom. I'm going to come to add object and add color solid, and I'll duplicate that. We can turn them both off. I'm going to call this one scale, and I'll call this one down here position. Okay, for position, let's come to filters, and we're going to apply grab distortion. We're going to use poke for this one. Make sure you choose publish OSC. And there it is right there. So you want the mix down to 0. I'm just going to come to height and just reset that. Set the duration just down to there while we do this. Okay, so I've got poke in there, and on the scale one, I'm going to come to filters, distortion. I'm going to choose disc warp. Alright, and I'm going to set the radius to 100. Okay, I want to grab scale here, come to properties, grab position, add a link, and come to properties again, grab Y position, add a link, right, into these links drag the position generator, and we are going to choose filter, disk warp center Y to filter poke center Y, and down here filter disk warp center X to filter poke center X. Okay, so just this disk warp control will always follow now this poke control here. Alright, now we want to grab this graphic group, and I'm going to grab position, a link, and could just duplicate them and change them, grab Y link as well, Y pos, X pos, and going to come to properties, and we want to open up scale and add a link for the X, and we want to add also a link for the Y. Y scale and X scale. Okay, next we want to link everything up. Right, so we'll hook up the scale links first. We want into these source wells for the X scale and Y scale, we want to drag in this generator with the disk warp filter on it. Drag in the generator, don't drag in the actual filter itself. That's not going to work. So then we want to choose here filters disk warp radius, filters disk warp radius. You'll see it squashes it down. It's squashing it down by a tenth of its size. So to restore it size, we're going to add 10 here in the scale value of the link. Okay, we'll do the positions now. So grab the position link for Y. So we should see Y position, X position link here. Drag in the position of the generator that we call position, and it has the poke filter on it. So then we want to choose filters poke center Y. You'll see the graphics shoot up when we do that. So we're going to add -0.5 to the offset to bring it back down. And for the X, filters poke center X and -0.5 and the offset again. I could jump into Quartz Composer to explain how filters work in motion. The geometry is different. That's the reason for these offsets. But better than that, I'm going to put a link in the description for you for an awesome, really very useful set of instructional guides from Fox Mahoney, all about the various ways you can set up on-screen controls using filters and other things in motion. Alright, so carrying on, the on-screen controls are there. So we've got poke for position and disk warp for size, all good. One last thing I think we have to do, I'm not sure if we actually need to do it in this situation, but we'll grab that controls group, we'll come to group properties, and we'll choose fixed resolution. Okay then, next we're just going to tidy up the published controls. Last steps now is just to grab that poke filter, and we're going to publish center and come to disk warp, grab radius, and we'll publish that as well. Okay, we want to call center position and radius is scale. So let's height, duration, text, color, text, bubble cover. Let's put text up the top and text, color and bubble color there, height, duration, position, scale, good to go. So the next step from here, we're going to convert project to Final Cut title. And then from here we've got a new Final Cut title template. It's now unnamed, so to publish it we want to save it, choose your name, choose the category, theme, or make your own category, and then you want to hit publish and you're done. Then we can jump into Final Cut and have a look at what we did. Okay, time to wrap things up. So we're back where we started. We're in Final Cut, and this is the version of the template that we just did step by step. It's a bit rougher than the version we saw in the introduction. By the way, I think we might have missed a step. If you don't see the scale ring visible in Final Cut, then jump back into the motion template, find that disk warp filter in the inspector, check the box that says Publish OSC to make it visible. Save it, come back to Final Cut, then you should be able to see it. So let's check it out. Let's change the character. I'm going to, well, we're on minimum duration here. Yep. Alright, and maximum duration. And something in between. Now keep in mind, we didn't actually do in the motion project the build in and build out markers. That's probably a step that we should have done, but it's all a bit beside the point. Alright, scale controls, yep, position controls, cool. Let's crank the height up. And we're good to go. So I think if you're still watching by now, thank you very much for seeing it all the way through. I think if you have followed it all the way up to this point, then you definitely have an interest in learning about rigging and how to do things with rigs like I do. So I hope this was useful for you and worth your time. Cool then. Hey, thank you very much for watching. I will see you for the next one.